In the last few hours, something happened in the skies above Haifa that is going to change how every government in the world looks at this conflict. Not a warning, not a bluff, not a political statement whispered through back channels in the dead of night. Iran fired ballistic missiles directly at one of the most important industrial zones in the Middle East. And right now, Israel is scrambling. Not just militarily, not just politically, scrambling at a level that goes all the way to the top. The smoke rising above Haifa right now is not just smoke. It is a signal written in fire, sent to every defense minister, every military strategist, and every backroom power broker who believed that Iran's response would stop at words. They were wrong. And here is the thing that almost nobody in the mainstream media is connecting right now. This strike did not come from nowhere. This did not happen because of one event on one single day. This is the result of months of building pressure, crossed red lines, and a strategic doctrine that Iran just announced to the entire world in the loudest possible way. That doctrine says we are done waiting, and what it means for Israel, for the United States, for Lebanon, for Saudi Arabia, and for every single person living in this region right now, that is what we are going to break down for you today, step by step, no shortcuts. Just the complete picture of what happened, why it happened, and where this is heading next. Stay with me, because the deeper you go into this story, the bigger it gets. And before we go any further, if you are here because you want analysis that actually goes beneath the surface, that actually connects the dots that the 60-second news clip leaves hanging, hit subscribe right now. This is exactly what we do here. Every major development in this region, we are here covering it in depth, covering it completely, and covering it honestly. Hit that subscribe button so you do not miss what comes next, because what comes next is coming fast. Now let us talk about what was actually hit in Haifa and why it matters so much more than the headlines are telling you. The Haifa petrochemical and industrial zone is not some symbolic target sitting on the edge of a map. This is the economic spine of northern Israel. The port city of Haifa houses one of the largest oil refineries in the entire Middle East region. It processes hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude oil every single day. It feeds the fuel, the chemicals, the industrial output that the entire country's economy depends on at a fundamental level. When Iran targeted that zone, it was not random, it was not emotional. It was a calculated, strategic message delivered in the most direct possible way. We can reach the thing that hurts most. Now, why Haifa? Why now? And why this specific type of facility? To answer that, you have to rewind several days, because Iran did not wake up one morning and decide to fire missiles at northern Israel for no reason at all. There is a chain of events that leads directly to the smoke rising over that city right now. And that chain matters more than almost anything else in this story. Iran's official military statement was explicit and direct. The Haifa strike was a direct retaliation for Israeli airstrikes on the Mashahar petrochemical complex in southwestern Iran. Now, if you have not heard much about what happened at Mashahar, that silence from major news networks is itself a story worth examining very closely. Mashahar is the largest petrochemical hub in all of Iran, more than 50 individual plants operating across the complex. A production capacity of roughly 72 million tons every single year. This is the backbone of Iran's civilian industrial economy, and Israeli aircraft hit it. So Iran responded in kind. Not a military target for a civilian target, an industrial facility for an industrial facility, a direct, calculated mirror of exactly what was done to them. That is the doctrine we are now watching take shape in real time, and it changes everything about how this conflict works. Now here is where this story gets even deeper. For years, and I am talking close to a full decade, Iran operated under what geopolitical analysts called strategic patience. The concept was straightforward on paper. Absorb the pressure, absorb the strikes, absorb the provocations, wait for the right moment, respond only when the response will actually mean something that cannot be ignored. That era is over. What has replaced strategic patience is something Iran's military leadership has been quietly signaling in their statements for months, and just demonstrated at full scale for the first time. Preemptive deterrence. That phrase sounds technical, but what it means in plain language is this. Iran is no longer calculating whether to absorb a blow. They are now calculating whether to prevent the blow from landing in the first place. Think about what that shift means strategically. If Israel moves air assets toward Lebanon, Iran does not wait to see if bombs fall on Beirut. They assess the threat, they identify the right target, and they move before the first bomb is dropped. We saw this exact logic play out with Haifa. The strike was not chaotic. It was not a desperate act taken in anger. The Iranian military matched the scale and the type of target, a petrochemical facility for a petrochemical facility. They released a clear, deliberate public statement explaining exactly why it happened. And they calibrated the response carefully. This is not improvisation. This is a doctrine being executed methodically, and the world just saw proof that it works. Now let us talk about the air defense question, because this is where the most uncomfortable conversations are happening in defense ministries around the world right now. The Iron Dome, the Arrow system, David's Sling, these systems have been described for years as the most sophisticated layered missile defense network ever built. Billions of dollars of investment, decades of engineering, continuous upgrades and improvements driven by real combat experience. And yet missiles reach their target over Haifa. That single fact is being studied very seriously at every major military headquarters that follows this conflict. Because when a layered, expensive, world-class missile defense system fails to intercept a determined and sophisticated ballistic missile barrage, the entire concept of deterrence shifts underneath everyone's feet. Countries that were told to rely on air defense as the final answer to missile threats are now running the numbers again. And the numbers are not producing comfortable conclusions. This is not just an Israeli problem. This is a global defense industry problem. Governments that have purchased or are planning to purchase similar systems are watching what happened over Haifa and asking very hard questions about what their money actually buys them. Meanwhile, in Washington, a very different kind of scramble is happening right now. The United States has invested enormous political capital, financial support, and military hardware into the security architecture of this region. Every time that architecture is put to a serious test and falls short, the credibility of American deterrence in the region takes a real and visible hit. Not a theoretical hit, a practical, observable one that every regional actor can see clearly. The question being asked right now, not in front of cameras, but in the secure meetings that cameras are never allowed anywhere near, is whether the regional security equation has permanently shifted, whether the rules that govern this conflict for the past 20 years still apply, whether the strategic assumptions that everyone built their planning on are still valid, and nobody has a clean, confident answer to that question tonight. Let us zoom out even further, because what happened over Haifa is directly connected to something much larger moving across this entire region right now. Look at Lebanon. The ceasefire that was announced with genuine hope 2 months ago is under pressure that many serious analysts did not expect to see arrive this quickly. Strikes continue in the south, civilians are being killed, villages are being hit, and Iran has drawn a specific, publicly stated red line on this. As long as military operations continue against Lebanon, the response will continue. That line is not vague, it is not rhetorical, and it is directly connected to every missile that just flew toward Haifa. But here is the piece of this story that most people are completely missing right now: Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia was supposed to be the central pillar of the American diplomatic strategy in this region, the crown jewel of the Abraham Accords framework, the Gulf power that would normalize relations with Israel and anchor a unified regional front against Iranian influence. That was the plan, that was the strategy that enormous American diplomatic energy was poured into. Now look at what is coming out of Riyadh. Silence. Careful, deliberate neutrality, a very strategic slow walking of any further diplomatic commitments. When a regional power with the weight and resources of Saudi Arabia begins hedging in public, that is not an accident. That is a strategic assessment being made in real time based on observable facts. They are watching which direction this conflict is moving. They are calculating which side of the regional equation is holding firm and which side is being fundamentally challenged. And right now, the conclusions they are drawing privately are not the conclusions that Washington was counting on when it designed its regional strategy. The map of alliances in this region is being redrawn, and the pace of that redrawing is accelerating faster than most outside observers have acknowledged. If this analysis is helping you understand the full picture of what is actually happening, subscribe right now if you have not already. Seriously, hit that button right now because this story is not close to finished. The next 48 hours could bring developments that completely change everything we just covered. The next move matters enormously, and if you are not subscribed, you are going to miss it when it breaks. Now let us talk about what comes next, because this is the question that actually matters. Does this escalate further? Does Israel respond directly to the Haifa strike? Does Iran's new preemptive doctrine create a cycle of action and reaction that neither side has the ability to stop? Here is what the evidence actually points toward. Both sides have historically understood the concept of calibrated response. The Haifa strike was calibrated. It directly mirrored the Mashahar attack in nature and in scale. It was not a strike on a military installation. It was not aimed at civilian neighborhoods. It was economic facility for economic facility, industrial target for industrial target. That specific calibration leaves a narrow but real path toward de-escalation, if both parties choose to take it before the window closes. But Lebanon is the wild card that complicates every calculation right now. If the ceasefire collapses completely, if large-scale military operations continue in the south without restraint, then the chain of events that led to Haifa will not stop here. It will continue to somewhere far more dangerous and far harder to pull back from. The players who hold the most real leverage in this moment are in Washington and in the quiet, private back-channel conversations between regional powers that happen completely away from every camera, every microphone, and every press release. Whether those conversations are happening right now with genuine seriousness, whether they are producing any real progress, that is the question that will determine whether the Haifa strike is eventually remembered as a dangerous escalation that was contained just in time, or the moment when containment failed entirely and the region crossed a line it could not cross back over. Here is the bottom line. And hold on to this, because it matters for everything that comes after today. The Middle East that analysts thought they understood 2 years ago is not the Middle East of today. The rules of engagement have been rewritten in real time and fire, in plain view of the entire world. The old deterrence equations have been cracked open. The assumption that certain targets were permanently untouchable, that certain defense systems were impenetrable, that certain diplomatic frameworks would hold under this kind of pressure, every one of those assumptions is now being stress tested simultaneously. What we are watching right now is the negotiation of an entirely new set of rules for this region. That negotiation is happening through missiles and smoke and fire, not through diplomatic cables and formal conference tables. That is brutal, that is dangerous, and it is the reality on the ground today. For every person living in this region, in Israel, in Lebanon, in Iran, in the Gulf states, the stakes of how this negotiation ends could not be higher. Real families, real communities, real lives on the line, depending on decisions being made right now in rooms that most of us will never see, by people whose conversations we will never hear. The smoke over Haifa is beginning to clear, but the reverberations of what happened today are only just beginning to spread through every capital, every military headquarters, and every alliance in this part of the world. The next move matters enormously. The window for de-escalation is real, but it is narrow, and it will not stay open forever. Stay informed, stay locked in, because this story is far from over. And before you leave, I want you to answer one question in the comments right now, and I mean right now, while this is still fresh in your mind. With Iran clearly shifting to this new doctrine of preemptive deterrence, and with the Lebanon ceasefire under this kind of pressure, do you believe full regional escalation is now inevitable, or is there still a realistic diplomatic path out of this before it goes further? Drop your answer below. I read every single comment on these videos. This is exactly the kind of conversation that matters right now, and I genuinely want to know where you stand. Subscribe if you have not yet. Share this with someone who needs to understand what is actually happening, and stay safe out there.